Hey, Calvin here, Simi Sigma, and this is The Alchemist. This is probably one of the most important books I've ever read, and it was recommended to me by a really good friend when I was doing my undergraduate program at Cal Poly. The Alchemist is a story about a shepherd boy named Santiago. And Santiago has this reoccurring dream of finding this great treasure in the pyramids of Egypt. So he sets out on this adventure to try to find this treasure, and along the way he meets a lot of different people who sort of help and guide him towards this treasure. Now, one of the people that he meets is this old traveler, and this old traveler is really the king of Salem. Now, this man tells Santiago about the omens of life. And now, specifically in the context of this book, omens are not a bad thing. They're not a bad sign. Instead, omens are really sort of the signs that life gives you to either point you in the right direction or stray you away from something that might not be so great for you. And I think there's a lot of parallels between that story and just real life in general. A lot of people go throughout life not really paying attention to these signs that life and the universe is giving you. And so they're often kind of wandering aimlessly on a path that, might not be the path for them. Now you might be thinking, Calvin, what does this book have to do with this video, this topic that you want to talk about? Well, I will get to that in a second. So in this video, I want to talk about sort of my path and my career as I was going through school, college, and starting off in my early career. And I want to talk to you about some of the omens that I sort of listened to and some of the omens that I straight out did not pay any attention to. So a lot of you might know Simi Sigma from a lot of the fluid mechanics videos that I posted a very long time ago. Those seem to be the most popular on this channel. And so I also obviously do some other topics like programming, I do structural analysis, I do statics, and just a whole slew of other mechanics and engineering topics. And so you might be thinking, yeah, well, that makes sense. Calvin is an engineer. And you would be right, partially. So as the title probably suggests, I want to share this story of how I sort of switched careers away from civil and structural engineering and how I ended up in the career path that I am on now. So in order to sort of understand this, we need to rewind the clocks a little bit. So let's go all the way back to Calvin in high school. Now, when I was in high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do as a career or as a profession. I really enjoyed learning and just going through all the subjects and just sort of all the stuff that I was learning at school, but I didn't ever sit down and really kind of have a conversation with myself and ask myself, hey, Calvin, what do you want to do with your life? Now, I remember when I started my senior year, that was sort of the time when students are starting to apply for college, trying to pick what major they want to major in. Now, I remember going to my computer when applications were very soon due, that I would go and see the course catalogs for a lot of the colleges that I wanted to go to. And because I had no idea what I wanted to do, I remember sitting down, opening up the course catalog, and reading through different course descriptions in all sorts of different areas. Now, I eventually came across a lot of structural engineering type of courses that I found really interesting. I think one of them was like bridge design. And I was like, hey, you can design bridges. I liked Legos when I was smaller. I like building things. I like math and physics. So maybe this is the right path for me. And I kid you not, that's exactly how I chose my major. I decided to major in civil engineering, or at least apply for it. About half a year later, I got accepted to Cal Poly Pomona, and I was so excited. And you know what? The first couple years of going to Cal Poly and studying civil engineering were great. I got to experience living on my own. I joined a bunch of different academic clubs. I really enjoyed all my calculus and physics classes, and even some of my early mechanics classes like statics and dynamics. Now, the third year, I start year 3, and during year 3, we have to take this programming class, and it's sort of a class where you take Excel VBA, so you write macros and scripts for Excel, and then you also learn Visual Basic, and you also learn a little bit of MATLAB. Now, I've never programmed in my life before, other than I think one little computer class I took when I was in middle school. But outside of that, I really didn't have an interest in it. I didn't know too much about computer programming. But here we were trying to go through a class that was just a requirement for me to get my degree. And so I enrolled in it because I had to. And it was terrible. It was probably one of the worst classes I've ever taken. And it wasn't so much the material itself, it was more along the lines of how the material was presented. Now, when you're learning programming and any sort of coding, it can be very challenging because you can't think as a human. You have to think like a computer, like a machine, like what the computer would understand. And so the mentality and kind of the mental skills you have to develop in order to write software, it's a little bit different than what I was used to. Now, our teacher was straight trash. And it's amazing how much that can influence a person within just one class. It could totally change the course, the sort of outcome of that person's life simply from the interaction that they have with a teacher who just can't teach. Now, I don't want to go on and on complaining about this professor, if I should even call him a professor. But the point was, I walked out of that class absolutely dreading coding and programming, and I just didn't learn much, and it was a very, very frustrating class. And so I walked out of that class almost swearing to myself that I would never, ever program or code ever again. But life is really strange, isn't it? Listen to your omens. Now, strangely, after this programming course and into my fourth year, I was starting to have doubts about civil and structural engineering. I didn't really know where these doubts were coming from because I thought this was the right path for me since I was enjoying a lot of my physics classes, my math classes. And it was sort of interesting because my fourth year, that's when I started to take some of my design classes. Now, all of you civil and structural engineers know you have to take a handful of different design classes, such as steel design, concrete design, timber design, and a few others. Now, as I was going through those courses, I remember just not enjoying those particular courses like I did some of my other classes like mechanics, physics, and math. And this was sort of disheartening because this was what I was working towards when I selected civil engineering on my college application. I thought this was really going to be what I wanted to do. And it turns out, as I was going through those classes, I was just not enjoying them. Listen to your omens. On top of that, I had a few internships at that point, and I was not enjoying the internships either. Listen to your omens. So that was sort of my fourth year. Now, at the start of my fifth year, this was when things started getting really heavy. So I was set to graduate at the end of my fifth year at Cal Poly, and I was looking into grad school and just progressing my educational career a little bit further. And if you're doing structural engineering, most companies, most places, most groups require that you have at least a master's degree in structural engineering. So I decided to pursue a master's degree, and I chose structural engineering because, again, I really like the math, I really like the mechanics, and I really enjoyed the physics. So I thought, yeah, structural engineering is maybe for me, even though I was having doubts at that point. That, and I really, really wanted to go to my dream school, and that was UC San Diego. Now, at the end of my fifth year, something weird happened. There was a course that was introduced at Cal Poly, and it was a very specific Excel VBA course. Now, I had already done some Excel VBA in that programming course I took during my third year, the course that I absolutely hated. But I don't know what it was about this new course that prompted me to take it during my fifth year. Maybe it was because I really enjoyed working with Excel and trying to create different spreadsheets for all my classes. There was something very fun about putting all of the analysis tools together and then being able to create a worksheet that could solve problems and spit out numbers and calculate answers. And so maybe that's what it was. I decided to enroll in that class, and it wasn't a class that was a part of my degrees. It wasn't something that was required. It was just an extracurricular class, but I wanted to take it because I basically wanted to up my Excel skills and be able to create more complicated spreadsheets. Now, when I was going through that class, we were still learning the same concepts of programming as I learned in that programming class during year 3. However, the instructor was really, really good. And I just remember enjoying every single lecture that I went to. I enjoyed every single assignment that we had to create, and I just remember it being a lot of fun. What do you know? Listen to your omens. Now, I will say that that Excel VBA class that I took during year 5, the one that I really, really enjoyed, it wasn't necessarily a class that solidified my career in software engineering, but it was certainly a turning point, and it got me sort of thinking about different possibilities and different opportunities that I could take this newfound knowledge in software and coding. Okay, so that class finishes. I graduate Cal Poly at the end of year 5. I do get accepted to UC San Diego to do structural engineering. That's where I went to for my master's, and I'm really, really excited. Now, I had a few friends that went to UCSD just the year before, and in fact, one of them was the same person who recommended this book, The Alchemist. And I remember talking to that group of friends during the summer, and I remember them telling me that, hey, Calvin, if you're going to do structural engineering at UC San Diego, you should really learn this thing called MATLAB. Now, all of you engineers might know what MATLAB is, but for those of you that don't, it's essentially a programming language / IDE, a piece of software that we use in structural engineering and a lot of other different types of engineering to solve math problems and do a lot of like analysis work. Now, my friends were telling me that MATLAB was going to be used in a majority of my classes at UC San Diego. So I spent all summer learning MATLAB. And this was right after that Excel VBA class I took during the end of year 5. And I don't know what it was about MATLAB, but I really enjoyed doing MATLAB. Listen to your omens. So I was thrilled to start UCSD. I was thrilled to start my grad program because I said, you know what, structural engineering is for me. I really like math and physics and mechanics, and I know some coding. I know MATLAB. I'm really, really prepared for this. So grad school starts, and the first few days I'm super excited. I got into my dream school. I am enrolled in a lot of different types of classes, and that excitement lasted for probably just those 2 days. Now, we had to take a structural analysis course, an introductory structural analysis course, and it was okay. There was also a mechanics class that we had to take, which was also absolute trash. And honestly, I was not enjoying any of my classes that I was taking during that first quarter. Listen to your omens. Now, at the same time, I would say probably about midway through that quarter, I was starting to be very, very anxious. I noticed that my anxiety was rising. I wasn't enjoying these classes, on top of the fact that they were also pretty challenging, way more challenging than other courses that I've taken in the past. But again, there was just something about the classes and the curriculum that I just didn't like. And it brought me back to year 4 of Cal Poly, the year where I was taking a lot of structural engineering design classes. And I think all of that anxiety and worry just sort of amplified during this quarter. So much so that I had to reach out to one of my best friends just to talk through everything that I was going through, all of my doubts, all of my worries. I ended up talking to my parents and telling them, hey, I don't know if structural engineering is right for me. And in fact, I don't even know if I can finish this master's program. But being the supportive parents that they are, they told me to essentially keep progressing through this degree since it was only 4 quarters in total length and I was already almost done with one of the quarters. And after that degree, I could go on and explore and do other things, and it didn't have to be structural engineering. And I found a lot of comfort in that, and it sort of gave me a lot of courage and sort of the willpower that I needed to progress through the rest of my master's program and eventually sort of forge my own path, if you will. Okay, so at the end of that first quarter of my grad program, what I decided to do was I noticed that I was really enjoying the MATLAB, the coding part of a lot of my courses. So what I did for my second, third, and fourth quarters was to take more structural engineering courses that were focused on MATLAB. I started taking other courses that really utilized MATLAB just so I could code more. Some of the courses were the mechanics of aerospace structure, the analysis of composite materials, and when I was going through those courses, again, I was actually enjoying them just because there was a lot of coding involved. listen to your omens. Okay, so I was maybe starting to enjoy some of my courses, but I noticed that those courses weren't really tailored towards structural engineers, at least the typical path that a lot of civil and structural engineers tend to follow during their college and their grad programs, and that is going into civil structures or maybe aerospace structures or any other structural engineering line of work. I also ended up taking a few more design classes in grad school, and surprise, surprise, I didn't enjoy any of them. So at the end of the third quarter, that was the end of the first year of my grad program. And during the summer break, what I decided, instead of trying to do an internship in structural engineering, what I instead did was I enrolled in a local community college in San Diego, and I decided to take a few more programming courses. So during that summer and into the fall quarter of the second year, I ended up taking courses in Excel VBA, Java programming, C# programming, and a couple other courses. Now, I was doing this alongside trying to finish my grad program. Pro tip, don't take community classes trying to finish your grad program in structural engineering. It is very, very difficult. But I don't regret it at all because somehow I ended up managing that and I got to finish a lot of my programming courses and still finish my structural engineering grad program. So from the start of my second year in my grad program, I was pretty vested into programming. I didn't know what exactly I wanted to do with programming, but I just knew that it was really fun and it was something I really, really wanted to pursue. And so that's what I did. I ended up taking those programming courses. I started messing around with a little bit of iOS programming, which was pretty fun, super challenging. I didn't get the hang of it right away, but it was fun exploring mobile app development. And pretty much for the remainder of the second year, I did the bare minimum in my courses just to finish up the grad program, just to get my degree and to graduate and to move on. Now, towards the end of my second year, a former professor from Cal Poly, my undergrad program, found out what I was doing with programming. He knew that I was starting to get into coding. He knew I sort of tinkered around with mobile apps. And one day he asks me, "Hey, Calvin, can you make me an app, a mobile app that I could use in my structural engineering classes to teach students about modal analysis?" Now, for those of you that don't know, modal analysis is basically the analysis and the study of how structures naturally move, and move during seismic events. And at that time, I didn't know anything about mobile programming other than just tinkering around with iOS and a little bit of Android. But I took it as a challenge, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll make an app. And guess what? I spent most of my evenings and the weekends while I was finishing up my grad program working on this app. And it took me about 4 months. It was extremely challenging, but guess what? It was so much fun. I couldn't wait to finish up my homework just so that I could go back into the structural engineering labs at UCSD just to work on this single app that I was trying to build. Now, the app itself was very, very simple. It was just a single page application where students could input the mass and stiffness for a 4-story building and then press calculate, and it would show all the different frequencies, all the eigenvalues, all the technical stuff that my professor wanted. And it was so cool. Now, the thing was, while I was building this app, I was getting ready to graduate. And while I was getting ready to graduate, I also had to find a job. So just like any good grad student towards the end of their master's program, I started applying for jobs. Now, I wasn't applying for software jobs or any sort of programming jobs. I figured, well, I have a structural engineering degree. I should probably do structural engineering. And so that's what I did. I started applying to a lot of different structural engineering firms, a lot of different civil engineering firms. And thankfully, I did end up getting something right out of grad school. And it was with a great company, a great team, and I was decently excited to start that work and to sort of begin my career as an engineer. Okay, so I'm building this app, I've graduated, I've sent the app over to my professor, he really enjoyed using it, and I start my first week as a structural engineer with a great company. The people were great. The environment was really cool. I got to work with a lot of different architects and civil engineers and other structural engineers, interior designers, graphic designers. It was a really cool place. It was a very integrated approach to structural engineering. But there was a little bit of a problem, and it was the same problem I was running into year 4 of Cal Poly and most of all of grad school, and that was I was just not enjoying the subject. I was just not enjoying the work. And so I started freaking out again because I was like, well, I got this job. I got a master's degree in structural engineering. I should be super excited, but I just wasn't. And so naturally, I tried to excite myself about the stuff that I was doing, and it worked for a little while. I even tried to incorporate some of the coding stuff I learned in my Excel VBA class into some of the spreadsheets that I was doing at work, but it just wasn't working. And I think at the core of it, again, I was just not enjoying the subject, and I did not feel like the field of structural engineering or civil engineering was for me. Okay, so then what? Well, I continued working, but there was a program that I found online that was giving away a scholarship to basically study Android development. Now, Android development uses a programming language called Java, at least at the time. And Java was something I had learned during the community class program that I was taking during grad school. And so I was like, hey, what the heck? It'll be a scholarship to study Android development, and I already created an Android app and it was pretty fun, so why not? And so I applied for that scholarship, and weeks went by, months went by, and I didn't really hear anything. Now, I was reaching the end of my first year at this job, and I get an email. I open up this email, and it's from the program that I had applied to for this scholarship to study Android development. And to my surprise, I actually got the scholarship, and I was so excited, in fact, that I ran out of the office straight into my car, and I called my mom, and I told her about the news. I said, hey, this is a scholarship to basically study Android development, and maybe I can take this and run with this and do something with this for my career. Now, towards this same time, I was also thinking about leaving my job and just going back home, moving back home, and trying to figure out what I really wanted to do. Now, when I got this scholarship, I took it as a sign, and I decided that this scholarship was the sign that I needed to basically do just that. Quit my job, move back home, and figure out what I wanted to do. At least in the meantime, I had this scholarship that I could work through while I was trying to figure out what I really wanted to do. And that's what I did. During that call, sitting in my car right outside of the office, I decided that day I was changing my life. I was going to quit my job in a few weeks, move back home, and try to pursue something I really wanted to do. Okay, so about a month after that email, I decided to put in my letter of resignation. I left my job. It was very, very hard to do because the team and the people and everything was really good. I was just not enjoying the subject and the work that I was doing, and I felt like I was meant to be on sort of a different path. So after leaving that job, I packed my bags, moved out of San Diego, came back home, and for the next year, all I did, well, it wasn't exactly a year, it was more like 9 months, but during that time off, all I did was I hit development and software and coding and mobile development and web development super, super hard. I learned all sorts of things from Android development, more Java. I learned Python. I learned web development, JavaScript. Got into React and React Native. Those are web frameworks for building web-based applications. And it was honestly like the most fun studying that I've done in a long time, other than a lot of my physics and math courses. But during this time, I was only focused on coding and software and programming. Now, towards the end of that 9 months, I started to apply for jobs and internships. And thankfully, I got my first internship. It was actually known as an apprenticeship at a company out in Boston on the east side of the United States. So I packed my bags and I moved to the East Coast just for this apprenticeship. Now, the apprenticeship was only about 3 months, so I wasn't guaranteed a job afterwards. It was really just like a glorified internship. And it was so much fun. I got to work on Android applications, learn a lot more about software development, learn a lot more about working with a team to build software applications, and I was just literally having the time of my life working. Isn't that crazy? So that apprenticeship basically changed my life, at least my career life after that. Okay, so where am I now and what am I doing? So at the time of recording this video, I've been doing software development for a couple different teams for several years now after that apprenticeship that I had in Boston. And I've got to work on a lot of different types of software. I've done Android development. I'm actually doing iOS development right now. And it's been a lot of fun being able to create applications, and the fact that you can write software, click run, and have it running on this little computer in your pocket is really, really fascinating. So since that scholarship, I have never really looked back. Now, I do miss engineering from time to time, and I think that's why I still continue making a lot of the videos that you see on this channel, because I really do love mechanics and physics and science. I think there's something really, really cool about it, and I love just learning about the world through the lens of equations and frameworks and systems and theories. So as you can probably tell, during my journey from high school all the way to kind of where I'm at right now, you've probably picked up on the fact that there were a lot of omens, a lot of signs that were showing up, popping up on this path that I was walking when I was getting my degree, getting my first job, etc. And some of those signs, some of those omens I paid attention to, and others I did not. However, I think the most important lesson here is that as you're going on with your life and you're progressing towards the things that you want to progress towards, there's going to be a lot of things that pop up on your path. And I think especially when you're in school, either in high school or college or grad school, that is the perfect time to explore your interests and explore yourself. You are not at all defined by what's written on that degree, on that piece of paper when you graduate. Just because it says civil engineer or structural engineer doesn't mean you have to do that. For me, it was that entire journey of trying to discover what I really, really enjoyed doing, and I don't think I would have discovered it in the same way had I not gone through all the things that I went through. Now, it was really tough at times because a lot of those times I felt very anxious and very lost and super scared and just very overwhelmed by kind of getting stuck in a place that I just did not want to be. However, looking back at all those things, I think they were necessary for me to really understand that, hey, exploring your interests is not just a good thing to do, but it is necessary. Otherwise, you're gonna stay on that path and you might end up someplace where you don't want to end up, but you're just sort of stuck there because you decided to go against what life and kind of yourself was pointing to in terms of interests and things that really intrigue you. Okay, so to sort of wrap this really long story up, if I could go back in time and tell my younger self just one thing, surprisingly, it would not be don't do civil and structural engineering. I would not advise against that. In fact, I wouldn't even allude to the fact that I was going to not enjoy a lot of my coursework, at least my upper coursework in design classes and civil engineering, structural engineering. Instead, what I would tell myself is listen to your omens. Pay attention to the signs that life gives you and you yourself give yourself as you're progressing through school or career or through life, personal relationships, just anything in general. Listen to those signs because they're there for a reason. The reason you might be interested or intrigued by certain topics or certain articles or certain things in life is because they are important to you internally. Now, you might not be able to sort of rationalize that immediately when an omen sort of pops up, but they are important. So if you're a college student or a high school student or even a recent grad or even somebody who's deep in their professional career, don't think that you are just stuck there just because the degree that you got said a certain thing. Life is a very, very big adventure, and I believe the world is your playground, and so you ought to explore and play in that playground. Don't think that spending a few hours on the weekends or even during the evenings exploring an interest is a waste of time because it doesn't progress your career or your business or whatever. It's not a waste of time. If anything, the whole reason that you're attracted to it is because it's important to you. So, I'm glad that I eventually got to the point where I sort of understood that. Even to this day, I'm still exploring other interests, other areas, other things that I really want to do. And even though I'm very happy in my software engineering career, I know there's just so much more out there in the world to explore. And so just continue to be a lifelong student, and I think you will always be very pleasantly surprised with how certain outcomes in your life turn out to be. Okay, so that's about it. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for supporting the Semi Sigma channel for all these years. I'm glad that a lot of the content that I make has helped a lot of students and even some professionals in the work that they're doing. It is very, very satisfying. And even though I'm still doing software and mobile app development, it's still fun going back to some of my statics books and dynamics and fluid mechanics and being able to kind of revisit all the stuff that I really enjoyed about my college career and be able to share that with people that enjoy that content as well. So thank you guys so much, and I will end it there. So I hope you guys are all doing well, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Bye.